Hey everybody, welcome back to a new video on this channel, and today we convert a Next.js application into a Nuxt.js application. Of course, you knew it, so let's get started. Here we go. Yes, I'm not kidding, it is real. We'll take a Next.js application, we'll see in a second which one, and we convert it into a full-blown Nuxt.js application. Same features, we change the code as little as possible, we'll still do everything in idiomatic way, right? So we use Vue and Nuxt the best we can, all the modules around it. And of course, it's not like a super huge 100,000 lines of code application. It's a fine but real world application we'll convert over. So let's have a look at the application and then we'll get going. And the application is from Theo. Yeah, most of you might know him. It's called QuickPic. And if you have a look what it does, it is a very simple application that converts SVGs to PNGs, and of course it also renders PNGs in Square format. So we can just try it out here and say, okay, let's upload some SVG here, and then we can say, okay, we want it in 1024 times 2024 or in 2K or whatsoever. We can save that. It saves this for us, and we can do that again and again. And the other feature is to have an image and then generate it as square. So also here, if we upload a random image, so like, okay, please white background, black background whatsoever, we can also get that. And that doesn't seem too crazy, but of course the code is open source. So why not get going, and then we'll see how certain things of React and Next work in Nuxt.js. So of course the easiest way is we fork it. And of course I already did that here. QuickPic Nuxt exists, no changes. So let's dive into that and we go through it step by step. So here we jump straight away into the application. And of course we start with the nuxt.config.ts. Okay, the React compiler is enabled here and the config is wrapped to apply a plausible proxy. That's, well, one way to apply and change things in the next.config in this case, not the Nuxt config, and to apply some defaults. Of course, we'll also use plausible and integrate it later on. We have Tailwind here going on as well, right? Some tiny changes for the background foreground. That's easy post CSS to set it up as well. And then we have a public folder with a favicon, pretty smooth. And then we have the source folder. And the source folder is all the meat, of course. We have some CSS Tailwind setup, some CSS variables, sure, to make sure, okay, dark mode, white mode works, lovely. And then we have some TSX files here, right? So we have first the layout. So the general in Nuxt would have that as the App.vue or like the default layout. That's just used in general. We have also here plausible setup and runtime, and then just saying, okay, a body with some fonts over here, and eventually something rendered there. Don't worry about all the squiggly lines. I just skipped to install the dependencies because we won't need them. We also have OG and Twitter image generation. We'll also do it at the very end to implement that. And then we have our page.tsx, which is more or less just the index page saying, okay, hey, I am Theo, and so on, the links, and then the footer. Okay. What else we have? The fonts in here, Inter and Geist are used. We'll also, of course, use the same fonts as well. Utils, that's for the OG generation, that uses Next OG here. And then we have the tools route group. They have their own layout here with a back button. Okay, also all written in JSX. Nice. And then we have the tools layout, rendering the back button, and whatever goes in here, the children part, and then a little footer. Wonderful. And then we have Square image and SVG to PNG. We can look into one of them because they're pretty similar. So also here we have Open Graph and Twitter generation. Not sure why they're both of them, but that's whatever. Then we have the page itself, which just renders a component. So the SquareTool, TSX in this case, and some metadata. And if you look in here, this is actually the meat of the tools. And we'll go through that as well, but let's first create the base setup to make sure we install Nuxt.js, we get rid of the rest, and then we convert things step by step. All right, the first thing what we want to do is we want to remove the log file. We want to get in the package.json, remove all the dependencies and dev dependencies because we mostly don't need them. And then we take the next here and do a find replace to Nuxt. Don't need the turbo flag because Nuxt is running like all the major frameworks on Vite. That's very lovely. So we don't need that. We name it to QuickPic Nuxt and now we're good. And then we run pnpm add Nuxt to add Nuxt.js to the mix. All right, we're done here. So the first thing, of course, we want to do is we could now scaffold an application in front of you, but easiest is let's start with a nuxt.config.ts. And now if we start like writing export, default, define nuxt.config, yes, we get some imports, but we don't really need this here. We save that and it's not really auto-completed. So we run the dev server once, it is already prepared. After installing, we have this .nuxt folder here. And the first thing, if you come from any other project, we want to get rid of the tsconfig or like change that, because the tsconfig is always extending the config in nuxt/tsconfig.json. So this is very important because otherwise you will not get the completion. There we go. And now our define nuxt.config is also not red anymore. It's not squiggly. So we're good to go. Also, of course, things are already there. We can ignore it for now because we don't have anything to show. If we would now go to the browser, you know what, let's quickly do that. Let's go to the browser and see what's happening. And we see welcome to Nuxt, get started and so on and so on. So if make it smaller, it's a bit more legible. So we don't have anything there. Now back to the code and get things up and running. First, we want to create our own App.vue. I would start though with enabling the compatibility version here straight away to 4 because we want all the nice Nuxt 4 goodies. So we can also keep some of the directory structure. So what we want to keep here is we have this source folder. We don't really need it. We can just take the app folder and put it out of the source folder. So just like next to all the others. So let's just do it this way. It's easier. Yeah, we want to move all of them. We can remove the source folder. And for now, we are good. Now we have the app folder. And in here, we have various things, right? So let's start with the App.vue, get that going. Then maybe install Tailwind CSS and go off from there. I want an App.vue because we have multiple layouts, but there's also, I guess, one thing that should always be there. Maybe we don't even need to, but I think it would be a good thing to have that. So yeah, let's go ahead. We copy most of that, but actually we can just decide to copy this part in our App.vue. I create a Vue component here. We copy that in here. We already see, okay, there's some, let's say, quote unquote, weird things in the Vue universe. We don't need the plausible provider. We will do it differently. We don't need the body tag. Well, we'll come to that. Get the class anti-aliased, and then they're just children. So yeah, we don't have anything to render except our Nuxt page here to actually render things from the page itself, from the pages. Maybe I want to add some parts to the script part. So let's see what else the layout has here, and some metadata. So that's some fallback metadata. That's not a bad idea. And some font registration. The fonts we'll also get into, but first things first. We also don't need to import any CSS. This will be done easier later on. So let's start with the metadata. And of course, we don't need them that way. We can just say title and description are consts. And we, make sure we say, okay, they're set. That's fine. For the icons, we go through that in a second. And now we can just use SEO meta. So we say use SEO meta, and we add title and description. If we want to use OG tags, there are two options. It's either you can use the Nuxt SEO experiments, then that will be automatically added if you don't set them. So then OG title is the same as title, and the OG description is the same as description. Or we set it manually. I would opt in for the manual part, so just say OG title, OG description. As said, this can be automated away, but for our setup, I think this is the easiest for now. So far, so good. So we always have metadata if we need it. Wonderful. The font setup, we will do that in a second, but let's start with the very first page. So we can close that. Let's add a to-do here saying to-do. We still need fonts, and maybe also add the one attribute we wanted to add. With useHead, we can say HTML attributes. Actually, this also can be used serverhead because we only need to set it on the server. It will always be the same. And the attributes here, well, what do we want to say? Set? We wanted to set body, or actually in this case, it is not HTML attributes, but body attributes, and the class should be anti-aliased. So far, so good. The to-do is here. We have that. We're fine. So the layout, kind of done. I will not delete it for now because we still have to migrate the fonts over, to not forget that. But let's get going with the actual page here, because that page has some content and it doesn't have anything programmatically. It's really just like rendering that content. So we can just take that, and here we create our pages folder. So we say pages index.vue, and here, of course, it's a Vue component. We can omit the script part though and smash everything in here. Even remove the div. And here, you can change this to hi, I'm Alex. I did not build these tools, but I converted Theo's application to Nuxt. Wonderful. Also should, of course, give credits. So put a link here. So we can use a Nuxt link here actually, because a Nuxt link can do both. It can cover the externals. You can use href or just like an external link, or you decide, yep, it's fine. It will be automatically detected. So we can do that. We can say target blank, and we're fine. Okay. We can even copy that from up here, because also here we don't need an a tag. We can use a Nuxt link, and that's okay. Let's just copy that over because that seemed a bit easier. Wonderful. Now, formatting, nothing too big as well. Some alignments, some things. Also don't need that manual space here. And of course, all the class names have to go, because class name JSX, we don't use JSX, so we just use class here, and we're fine. Then we have some links. In Next, this was just a link. If it's internal, we use Nuxt link, and the href can stay. I would go for 2. That's a bit easier. For the footer also here, we can use a Nuxt link, and that's fine. So now we can save it. And let's have a look what our application now shows. We jump to browser. Sorry for that flash. We see exactly this. We see, well, not much somehow, because, well, there is no Tailwind yet, right? So we should fix that. We should make sure that there is actually something CSS to be applied. So let's install Tailwind real quick, do that, then install Nuxt fonts, and then continue. To install Tailwind, we just run a command. Before we set a compatibility date here, that's fine. It's always asked. If it's not set, then won't do much for now. Also, Nuxt, or in this case, the Vue router will warn like, oh, there are no links because we don't have these pages yet. That's fine. So what we want to do now is we want to run pnpm dlx nuxi module add. So I want to add a module, and we add Tailwind CSS. So if we write this, then Nuxi, the Nuxt CLI, an interface, will be executed, and Tailwind CSS will be installed in our dependencies, and it's also added straight away to the modules here. So that's all we need to do to get Tailwind CSS up and running. Wonderful. If we now switch to our page again, we'll see, hey, that's better, but it's not dark yet. And there's a simple reason why it's not dark. Because we didn't add the global CSS anywhere. So let's add the globals. It's more or less the Tailwind inclusion and some setup. And then everything should be as usual. We can do that by using the Tailwind CSS module options. And here we have the CSS path, and we should point that to assets globals.css. Now, the tilde is in this case the app folder, and we don't have an assets folder yet. So we should really add that, because that's a good practice. Assets, here we go. And we move globals over to the assets folder. And now all it takes is taking a look at the browser, and we see, hey, we're pretty good. If we compare that to, if we go back here to start page, this looks pretty similar, especially if we reduce it size-wise. The only thing is the fonts don't really match up yet, right? Correct. And well, I would probably also change the title up here real quick. So Tailwind is installed. Let's change the title, then add the fonts. We change the title in our App.vue, say QuickPic Nuxt, or like this, and just say QuickPic built with Nuxt.js. Yeah, the description, we're fine with the description. I will in general set the page to not be indexed, so it doesn't actually steal any SEO juice or whatsoever. It's just an example after all. Okay, now we can talk about the fonts, because yeah, we still need fonts, and for that we use the command we just used, but we add the fonts module, which is the Nuxt fonts module. That will make things way easier. While this is installing, let's take the fonts in here. we have Geist and Inter, and only Geist is really used. So let's put it in the public folder we already have. It's outside of the app folder, so here, and just put it in here. We just name it Geist, all lowercase. We can remove the fonts folder for now, and eventually we want to add that. So instead of referencing it locally or similar, what we can do is in our Tailwind config here, we can just say we extend the font family, and we say Geist, and we say Geist sans serif. So this is more or less all we need to make it work. Of course, now we also want to use our App.vue and set it up. Either we set it here, so we can say everything used font Geist, because why not? Or we could say it per page. We could set it wherever we want. And believe it or not, that's all you need to set up the fonts, because if we take a look now in the browser, everything is as it should. I mean, you might see this small difference, but especially if we tab, we see no font glitching, anything. And to double check, of course, we can just say, hey, let's check that out with the inspector. Take this one, go to fonts over here. We say the font that's used is Geist. And where it comes from, well, the good thing is that Nuxt fonts itself will more or less just pull the right font, either in our case from the local place. We have that here, right? Fine, can just load it from there. Or if it's not available locally, from Google Fonts, from Adobe, and so on, so on. So from all the different places where fonts are provided. And eventually it will also serve that after being built locally, so you don't have to worry with GDPR and all these problems. So the fonts, check mark. Nice, sweet. Then let's see what else we need. First, we can remove the to-do, of course, here. Wonderful. Then I saw a Tailwind config. We can change a few things here because, yeah, we export a config, but we don't need that content part. It doesn't do anything. We don't have any source folder anyway. And we can also say this should be a partial of a config. And we can probably also install a Tailwind CSS as dev dependency, just to say, okay, you know what? Let's not add a module, but add the thing itself as dev dependency to also get that resolved eventually. But yeah, that's not a big thing. Let's restart the dev server and continue here. We can also remove the nuxt.config now. Well, still have the plausible part that we will tackle eventually. But for now, we don't need that. We can change the license here. My name, because, well, mostly that code, it's fine. Also, it's MIT, so it doesn't matter much. We don't need the post CSS config, by the way, because it's all included in the module. That's very lovely. So we have that. The git ignore, we should probably pump that up a little bit. I just copy that out from whatever I usually use as git ignore, and it's also in the modules, which is basically all the Nuxt things, node modules, some logs, and env except env example, to just not accidentally commit some stuff there. Then we're good. ESLint, we could use Nuxt ESLint as the module, but we can skip over that here. Whoever wants to can feel free to do that. And that icon, well, that was the default next icon we can also get rid of because this is the one that's used. But we could add that because we didn't add the fav icon yet. So how to add that fav icon? We also go into the App.vue. We have use server head already here. We add another link. And in here we say we have one entry. The rel is icon. Icon should be enough, I think, to make sure that this works. We can say the type is image svg plus xml, and we just link to it as /favicon.svg via href. So this is the plain, very simple way of setting it up. And now if we once again have a look in the browser, we'll see lovely, the favicon over here is there. It's the same, and now, yeah, we're good there. Perfect. Now maybe one more thing, going back to the code in the index.vue before we tackle a few things. Here we can change the link to QuickPic-Nuxt just to make sure this is actually pointing to the right version, and we're good here. Okay, the layout now can go. We don't need any of these local font registration because it just works. We don't need the plausible provider set. We do that differently later on. That's fine. OG images, we'll tackle that at the very last because it will be very similar for most of the cases and we need less files. So now we should take a look at the tools part. And first what we do is these tools part, we move that into pages because this is a route group, and Nuxt also has route groups now. They don't do much, but you can group routes by a certain name, for example, tools, by putting them in these round brackets or parentheses. Now, let's have a look into that layout next to it here, because we want to check that out. Tools layout. Also, we have a back button. We'll come to that in a bit. So first, this screams like a layout component. So why not add layouts/tools.vue in this case, and create a view component out of that. Wonderful. Now let's just take all of this here, copy that over, because this is our layout. And instead of children, of course, we want to just render slots, because we use slots. We replace the class name as usual. And here we can also use a Nuxt link once again. This is very similar to what we had before, right? In the footer, but that's good. Okay, now let's implement that back button here. Also, this is a component, so let's create components, a folder, and let's say back button, button.vue. So far, so good. Let's copy what they had here in this lovely back button component. Is also just, once again, JSX over here. So we can just take that over, create a view component, and put it in here. Shouldn't forget to use class instead of class name, and instead of link, we just use Nuxt link. Here we put it 2. Don't need the script part because there is no script needed. And that's about that. Wonderful. Now, even better, that the back button itself is then automatically loaded in layout tools here. So if we now say, you know what, let's create, test.vue, just have a view component and say test, then let's go to that in the browser and see what's happening. And in the browser, we don't see much here, nothing of the layout, mainly because we didn't apply it. That was on purpose. So let's apply the layout by using define page meta that only works in page components. And in here we can say layout, and of course TypeScript kicks in, and we can set the tools layout here. Wonderful. So going back to the test page, seeing what the layout itself is doing, and we see it's still not there. And that's mainly, if we open the console, we'll also see why. Your project has layouts, but the Nuxt layout component has not been used. So that's a problem, and that gives our hint to say, okay, we have to go back to the App.vue, and in here we'll just have the Nuxt page. We want to wrap that in a Nuxt layout. This is also what usually happens in the plain, very simplified App.vue. So if you have layouts, the Nuxt layout will be used, otherwise not. Now we have layouts and we can use them. So we save them and we'll just refresh the page and see how things go. And finally, we have our layout there with the view on GitHub. If we click on that, that works. We have the back button that goes back to the index, and we're good. So layout applied. Now let's go back to the code, and we should remove the test.vue because, well, that works now. That's fine. We can also close the open editors here so you see a bit more. So the test one is good. Now the layout can go because we implemented that, and now we want to check out the SvgToPNG or the square image. So we can choose, I would start with the smaller, and I think the smaller part is not this one, but the square image. Let's just double check. Well, they're both not too small, 197, and this one is 200 something. Yeah, let's start with the SquareTool here. So we have the page.tsx, and this just renders that SquareTool component, and we will do more or less the same. So what we're going to do here is just recreate an index.vue, and that index.vue is just a view component. It has the metadata, so this is also helpful. We should use that, and renders the components. So here we want to then render SquareTool. Doesn't exist yet. Don't want to import that. And the metadata, we did that before. Select both colons, const beforehand, and then just apply use head. So use head or use SEO meta is a better shortcut here. So use SEO meta, and we have title, description, and of course also the OG title. As mentioned before, there is a shorthand for that if we want to, but for now that's fine. Perfect. So we're good. Now we have to build a SquareTool, and now the real nice part starts. We can move the page fully, and now we take this, and this is the meat of the application, right? One of the two pieces of meat, so to say. SquareTool.vue, we create that. We create a Vue component, and I throw everything in the script part now. I will also close everything else because this will be quite some code. Here we see that. And it's all red and it's fine. So let's just dissect step by step what's happening. And then we'll transform in a Vue component with composables and all that. So first, let's collapse stuff. We have metadata here. We don't need that. That's already in the page. I don't know why it's this duplicate anyway. So it's fine. We don't need the imports, right? We don't need use client. We don't have that here. So we have this wonderful SquareTool function, which is the whole component, right? So if we scroll all the way down, this bracket ends here. Okay, good. Then we have some lovely template here, JSX, right? We can close that. And we also have some more. So maybe let's start with this, because it's always easier to copy over the template first and see. And here we have an if condition, right? If not image metadata, then return some JSX. And otherwise, do something else. So let's just take this, go all the way down to the template part. And in here, we say, okay, you know what? VF, or let's copy that first in here. And we just say, okay, VF, not image metadata. Then put it in. Wonderful. Now we have that big rest here, the big part. And this is the else condition, right? So we can just say if, or just copy it over once again. Ignore everything that's there. That was a bit too far. Else. So we have that rendered. Now let's go step by step through it. First, remove all the class names, replace them with class. It's fine. Static content, static content, static content. This is no static content. This is an on change. So we do add change. And we want to execute handle image upload. That's fine. Okay. You can close that. Lovely. Else. Now we have preview URL and render this. This won't work in Vue. Instead, we just do a VF preview URL to say, okay, if there is a preview URL, just render it. And as source, we say the source is the preview URL. Okay. Here, we just need two double brackets to have the interpolation. Same here. And in these places, as well as here. We don't need the space here. And here we also need one more. Okay, that looks fine. Now we have here something that's computed, or that's a statement. Sorry, it's an expression, not a statement. We also don't want to use the double quotes, but just a normal quote to make sure we can apply that. We have another on change. So we put an add here and put it in double quotes. And the same down here, of course. This will be replaced. I'll just do straight away black here. Wonderful. And on change, add change. Okay. Then we have an on-click function. Also, this would just go to an add click, and we can more or less keep that by just making sure we wrap that in quotes. Now, this isn't too happy about everything, but we will go through that as soon as we're there. Mainly because also here single quotes should be used, and then it looks a bit better, but we're not in the script part yet. So we have save, and also here at click, same idea. We can just wrap the double quotes around and we're good. Perfect. So template looks fine now. We will all go through these methods that are there because they're not really existing for now. Let's jump up to template, close that, and see what the rest is doing. So we have a lot of useState in here, and we can just replace that with a ref. So first, let's remove these wonderful curlies, and now go through things. So const image file set image file with useState. So instead, we can just say, hey, this is a ref, and it's called image file. We don't need a set method. We could create a set method, but we don't need to. Same here. We can replace that. That looks fine to me. Just need a ref. We can do it with all of them, actually. Just replace useState with ref, and we can take all these and set them like that. So far, so good. It's also not super common that null is used, but in this case, it's fine. We can use undefined and skip that. It doesn't matter too much. So what we want to do next here is a to-do. We want to add plausible. We want to do that later on because the whole scripts part is almost a separate section. So for now, let's just smash in a ts expect error to do. Fine. Then we have a handle image upload function. We'll come to that. Handle background color change, same, save image, and the useEffect. And here are some dependencies set for useEffect. So this will be quite interesting because what we can do is we can either say, you know what, let's just apply watchEffect, or we can use a watch. Both works more or less. So let's just try a watchEffect here. And, or you know what, no, let's go with a watch. I feel more like a watch because this resembles it pretty well. We also have to add the dependencies here. So like, okay, what do you want to watch? This area of things. And then we basically have a function giving the new values. So we can just prefix this with new if you want to, but we can also leave it like it is for now. And then we'll take this code over and put it in here. So that's our replacement for useEffect. Now, the other part is all these set things like set image metadata and so on, they don't really exist. First, let's go through the code though high level. If there's an image file, do something else, do something else. I would probably invert that and say, if there's no image file, well, then return early. And this is something like reset data. So not refresh next data, that's different, reset data. So let's create a function. It's called reset data. And we just put these things down here. That's the original code, right? So now we can remove that tiny part and this if check because we have an early if, it's guarded, we're fine. Now, the set part here is also something that doesn't really happen. So in Vue and Nuxt, this is just something very simple to say, hey, let's set the value to null instead of a set method. Because Vue also uses signals under the hood, they just are more implicit and not as explicit. So also here, canvas data URL value equals null, and we're good. And same with the image metadata, dot value equals null. Nice. Though these three functions were also called in the template further down below. So if we scroll down, we see here, we also have a reset thing, and it's the same, but the image file is also removed. So what we can do is, instead of having that here, we can just say, you know what, let's call a method saying reset data and image, something like that. And if we go up again, then we say function reset data and image, or with image, it doesn't matter. And we can just say, okay, you know what, these are these three things. So image file, the value is null. And then we just call reset data. And I would probably also group it that way. And now rename it to reset data with image. And we're fine. Wonderful. Now all the other set parts can also be rewritten. For example, here, that's a special case because here the previous state is important, but luckily we have the previous state, right? So we have image metadata.value equals the structure, the current state of image metadata.value, and exists apparently, and then just the rest here. So this is not a big deal in Vue, and to me, this seems a bit less verbose than that down here. But yeah, that's the preference. So next is canvas, data URL value. We set it here. And every now and then, it might also be important to check. So we are in a watcher here. So image file, in this case, is already resolved value and not the ref. So we don't have to add any .value. Otherwise, that might be looking different here. For example, here we want to have that .value for image metadata, and we have to use the value to get access to the data. And then we have the if context, do something, or we can also just do if not context return and save one little parent. And then also here, preview URL dot value equals this. Wonderful. Now aligning that, say, okay, there's an early return. We have this onload here to set that with a new image. If there's a result, the source will be set. And then after the reader is set up, we can that read as data URL. Okay, that's all from the original code. Reset data with image. Oh, I think I accidentally broke this down here, but it's fine. Here we go. Now, eventually to the handle functions. So they're a bit different because Vue doesn't have that nice of a syntax with the change event that might come in the future. And it's also included in one of my other videos. If it's out already, there's a link. Because what we have to do is we have to say this is just an event and this event is handled. So we can't access the event or target directly. So we have to cast that as HTML input element. And this is a bit, yeah, it's okay, but it's also a bit meh. And then we say image file .value is that, and the image metadata .value also here because of the ref. Don't forget the .value. We'll set that. You can also do an early return here, but you got the gist. Same here. This is just an event, and here also we have to cast that to say as HTML input element. I really like the other syntax a bit more, but maybe one day we'll also get that in Vue. And then we have the handle saved image. Now, this is almost working. We also have this big if, which I want to like change around. And interestingly, TypeScript is saving us here from a problem because canvas data URL and image metadata are refs. So we forgot or didn't add the .value yet. If we add that and also the .value here, the TypeScript errors are gone. Same with here. So it's really, really good to have TypeScript enabled and check all these things, right? Now, last but not least, I would really suggest if not, let's copy this over. If not this or not this, De Morgan's law, right? So we can just early return. I prefer to have the code a little bit lean and not that nested, and then we're good. The rest of the logic we don't need to touch. I'm also not a huge fan of like the whole document.createElement part in a Vue application, but because these are only created and then removed straight away to just make it possible to download these things, that's fine. And also it's the logic of it, so we don't want to touch on that. Okay, so we're safe. This seems good. No errors anymore, which is great. So now, why don't we have a look into the application and see what's happening. If we jump into the browser here, then we'll see Square image. Oh, what's happening? Oh, use plausible is not defined. That's correct. We didn't define it yet. We only said, hey, TypeScript, let's ignore that. So let's just jump back. And in our SquareTool here, use plausible. We'll just do a no up for now. And implement that in a second. Wonderful. Going back, we will see the following. Hey, it's almost working. Let's try if we can upload an image and if that will work as expected. So this is the Square uploader. So let's try this maybe. Takes a little bit. Hey, wonderful. Nice. Can change from white to black. It's just a very big image, right? Good. Lovely. The only thing is if we go to an initial application, then it looks a bit different, right? It's not, it's up there. And that's because we didn't apply the layout yet. We did in our test URL, but we didn't do it here. So in our index.vue, we just have to use define page meta because it's a macro, and we say layout tools and have our wonderful layout applied. So if we now check, this looks pretty much the same. Great. That means deleting some code. So we can delete the Square tools. We keep the OG part for now because we want to do it the very last. And before we dive into the SVG to PNG part, why not adding what we wanted to add before, plausible, right? Let's do that. First, just a general idea. We want to use Nuxt scripts. It's still in beta, but it's used widely. And they have straight away support for plausible. The package that was used originally also comes with a proxy, so we will use some route rules here to proxy the things around. If you have no idea what it all means, no worries, I'll explain in a bit, and also link to some more resources and videos where I explain things a bit more in depth if you're wondering what certain parts do. To get started, we once again want to add a module, and this time it is Nuxt scripts, so at pnpm nuxi module add scripts or pnpm dlx and so on and so on. So we wait for that, and while this is installed and also added to our config, we can already get going. Oh, it's already done. That was fast. So what we want to do is we want to use the module that's added here. And before we do that, we also want to add something called runtime config. So we can say runtime config. So this is more or less a way to use env variables and set them also at runtime. And we say public, let's add a plausible domain in this case, we want to add whatever is tracking. So for example, just the URL where this is deployed at some point, you can always override it with end variables. So it will be pretty lovely. We can save that here. And if you see here, you can override this value at runtime with Nuxt public plausible domain. So whenever you deployed it, you can change that. On the right-hand side, you can define a default or just leave it empty. That's up to you. And we can even define a lot more things. But let's actually add plausible. And that we can do straight away in here in our SquareTool file. And maybe we'll do it a bit more general afterwards. So what we're going to do is we have this usePlausible function. And let's comment it back on more or less. So let's create it. Even suggest it here. No, it doesn't. Okay. Then let's create it, usePlausible. This is a composable. So in here, we should return some things. And luckily, as mentioned before, we can use script. So we can say use script. And you have lots of options here already. And one of them is, of course, plausible unit analytics. And we're good. If you self-host it, in this case I do, you have to use the script input manually. So we say, we put in the source, then we put the destination. In this case, we also want to add a proxy. So for example, we want to add /v or /proxy, whatever, script.js. And then we want to also add, because it's a subfolder, data API to say, okay, this should point to the API event, always relative to what we're using right now. And we also want to set a data domain, but we don't have the domain right here. So let's get the domain. We get the domain by saying const domain equals use runtime config dot public dot plausible domain. You guessed it. Sweet. Now out of here, we get quite a few things. So we want to probably expose a few things. First, a proxy that is used. If the script is there, will just be straight away forwarded. But if the script is not loaded yet, then that proxy is used to store everything you send in there. And when it's loaded, that will be more or less worked through like a queue. It will be all fired and eventually sent to plausible. So that's pretty helpful. We want to return this. And I also would suggest to make a little quick and easy plausible function to just be conform with the code that exists. That's basically doing nothing else than proxy.plausible. So here you can pass any kind of arguments and you're good to go. Now, last but not least, we have this usePlausible. So we have to import plausible out of here. And then if we check where this is in the template, plausible, create square image. I think that doesn't fully fit yet because we need to pass the name as a string. And originally you have to use event here, and then we can just pass in the name and we should be fine. And of course, because we will use this in other components as well, we can take that and extract that. I would always only extract it if you need in other components. And in this case, we know we do because it's not only there to track. So we can add composables, use plausible.ts, and we can just say export, put it in here, save it, remove this, and things will work as before because this will be simply imported from usePlausible.ts thanks to the auto imports. So we're good to go. The to-do is gone. Wonderful. But the only thing is, this is not proxied yet. So we have to go back to the nuxt.config and say route rules. So I want to add some route rules. Wherever they deploy, they will be provided, right? So proxy for plausible. And obviously, we want to proxy the routes that we set up. So we set up this and this. And we proxy them by just saying, okay, you know what? Here, proxy and 2. And in here, we can, for example, just say like, okay, in my case, I just plug in my own plausible like this and my own plausible done here. You can also make these parts even more configurable. You can create a server part to do that, but that's also part of another video where I talk about route rules. So I talk about backend for frontend, proxying, all of them linked in the description. So from here, we're good. As I said, it's all more configurable, but it's working for now, and we want to keep it short for the sake of an example. Nice. So plausible, up and running. Let's get back to the second part. With the second part, of course, I mean the second part of the application, because now we have square image. We want to do SVG to PNG as well. Same idea as before. For the page, we can just copy that index page over here because it's literally the same besides the metadata. So let's just get these over here. Let's bring them in. Const here equals, remove the commas, and we're good. Now, of course, here we want to render the SVG to PNG tool, or just SvgTool, I think. SvgTool, yeah, something like that. And that's the meat here. So let's copy all of that code here over into a new component, SvgTool.vue. And this will be massive. That will be big. I mean, 250 is not too crazy, but a lot of content. So once again, a Vue component smashed everything in. And we can start from the bottom once again by saying, okay, here, we'll copy that as the happy case, because there is some non-happy case, once again, with the not image metadata. So we can just say like, okay, bring that in, v else. It complains that there is no v if beforehand, and we will change it now. Here is our v if, not image metadata. All the class names will be just class. Formatting. Here fails, it's true, lots of errors, that's fine. We go through these, and usually again we change the events. This is pretty similar to what we had before. Here is a component that we will use later on. So we just use a prop here. If the prop is named the same, then since Vue 3.4, I think we don't need to have this, but can just leave it in like that. Here we need some more curlies to make sure this is correctly extrapolated. No, interpolated. And we're almost good. Now this part here is pretty interesting because we don't have a map JSX has, right? So instead of the map, we just do a v4. So v4, and we do copy that over what we have here and say value in as scale, which is correct because scale is typed before 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64. That's the values that we had before that we've seen for the selection. So that's right. And also here we need to set a key. So we just set the key to value. That's looking good. Eventually, we also want to remove this part then, because we render that button now often enough. And that onClick is replaced by an addClick. And here we can just say, instead of set scale, we can straight away say scale.value equals value, because this will be a ref. Now, this class part here is pretty interesting because it has a dynamic part and a static part. The static part can be just expressed by using class equals, fine. And the second part, we can just bind the class attribute again and leave that almost in there. Just have to replace these with single quotes. Now most of the arrows go away. And there we are. Wonderful. That looks pretty good. Now Prettier is also happy. The SaveAsPngButton also here, we can just apply what we learned before. Just a colon in front and then remove it. It will be named the same. So that's fine. I wonder why that button needs all the info, but we'll come to that, I guess. And then we have a button that says onClick cancel. Just invoking that function. And here we are. The template looks fine. Closing that. Now, SvgTool. This is the main part of the component. To me, it's always interesting that this is at the bottom. I would expect it at the top. So we have this. And of course, this is a hook in React, right? So let's change that to be a composable. We leave the same though. It can just work like that. We say const scale equals ref scale. We have the type all the way at the top. So if you quickly jump to the top of it, we have the type scale here. Metadata can go, all of that can also go. And now what we have, scale SVG. That's probably used in SvgConverter. Yes, here. Another hook. Use FileUploader. And then another import React from React. Okay. SVG renderer props. And then we have the SVG renderer component. So maybe let's start with this even. Let's say we create a new component saying SVG renderer.vue. Before we get into that, let's see if this is actually still the name. Yes, let's do it here lowercase, it's fine. And copy all the things over from the SVG renderer. Let's get these. This is also the whole thing. Yeah, just double checking. Let's get these, save. New Vue components, put it in here. And this time the template is pretty easy. We have a ref, same concept in Vue. In this case, I will just name it container, not container ref. This is a bit too verbose for me. Then we have a useEffect here. So we can use watchEffect, for example, or the watch. And a container ref as well, and props. So let's define the props first with define props. You can just leave that as it is here. And we probably need access to the props in a second because SVG content is used, yeah, there. So let's say const props equals that. You can even destructure them now since 3.5 to just get SVG content out here. That works. Our container ref, I'll just name it to, yeah, container ref is actually fine. And here we can use Vue 3.5's use template ref function, and we can bind it to container. So we also get here straight away the binding, and the useEffect will just run a simple watch, or we can use watchEffect here because why not? We don't need to set up any dependencies because Vue will track them for us. So we can say, okay, it's based on the SVG content. We know that already based on what's happening. So that's great. For a watch, because we destructured things, by the way, this would have to be a getter. So we'd have to use SVG content here like this. Otherwise, that wouldn't work. And now we say, okay, if container ref.value, do something. Or, as I preferred, don't do something if the value isn't there. Then move things over. Container ref.value.innerHTML is the SVG content. And then we query the selector. And if there is it, set some things. Okay, SVG renderer is available and done. We can use that. And it will be used straight away by just referencing that down here somewhere. Yes, over here. So the any should also be resolved as soon as the TS server is refreshed. It happens sometimes. And we have used plausible again. That's nice. We can just destructure that to actually make it work straight away. This is all on the SaveAsPngButton, but let's cover that. Maybe let's cover that next. Let's see. So the SaveAsPngButton gets all of this, and then it will use the canvas ref, another template ref, so to say. Then it has a hook that's used in the original code, and then we'll render the canvas and the button. I'm not sure if I like it that much, mainly because I feel like if you want to have an own button, the responsibility is not to save it, right? It's more like a dumb component. But we don't even need that. We can just say, you know, let's just inline that, because I don't feel passing all of that to a different component that needs that information. So why not passing that in here straight away? Change the click to say, okay, we have this. We have the canvas. Wait, first the quotes. We have the ref set to, I'll just name it canvas, it's a bit easier. We also bind the canvas props with vbind. And it's hidden. That's fine as well. So that's the SaveAsPng button. Might have to format that again. And let's scroll up and get back to the part there. Because now what we want to do is we can remove these part because we don't need it as a function. We can expose that and say const canvas ref equals, well, we can just say use template ref once again, and we can point it to canvas. If we remove the comma, it works fine. Actually, this is then passed to useSvgConverter, and maybe we can look at that hook next, which will be composable in a second. Because here the canvas is passed in, and I'm not sure if that makes a lot of sense. Maybe, just from the feeling, I would probably try to not pass it in, but define the canvas inside the SvgConverter, because it's the responsibility of that composable to deal with that. So here we have the canvas. That seems to make a bit more sense, but let's see. We'll have a look at that in a second. Where is it even used? Oh, here, props.canvas, props.canvas. So maybe, let's say this canvas.value. Yeah, problem solved. Wonderful. Oh, there's some logs. Some logs we can also remove. Might send a PR to the actual application as well. Why not? So then we have useMemo here. And what's happening? This is calculated based on this information. Okay. There's some returns. And useMemo is based on these properties. So this, to me, this sounds a lot like a computed in Vue. And for that to work, we need these things to actually, well, not all of them, but these at least, to return a ref with the content so it can be properly tracked. So then we have a computed here. And then we say scaled SVG values or details or data, maybe data. We have a computed and we can get rid of this part because it will all be automatically calculated. Now we just have to get rid of the props part sadly as well and have to use that value here everywhere. Because now if any of these things inside that computed changes, that will be updated. Last thing, of course, here, this should probably also be a computed that's returned. So whenever this changes, that should also change the return value. And this might be scaled SVG data dot value dot width dot value dot height. Almost. Data dots. Yes. Let's make it a bit more readable by put it maybe down here. So these props are basically also computed to just say like, okay, that will be passed to the canvas itself. Whenever it's rescaled, these values will be updated. So that's exactly what we want. Now the convert function here. What's happening there? It is a save if the canvas is there. Then we have to go through that again and say, okay, give the name of the image metadata or whatever. And then a download link. SVG file name. Where's SVG file name coming from? Let's quickly double check. Oh, just here. Okay, that's fine. That shouldn't be any though. Let's have a look. Format that here. And now, of course, complaining because first they're used before passed in. That makes sense. This is a function. So ideally we move the scale function and the useSvgConverter function all the way down because these are just group-wise related here. Oh, and then scale SVG data dot value dot scale SVG here. Okay. Let me close the sidebar so you have a bit more code. Also, we don't go through much into the logic of it, right? This is how it works in detail is not that important. It's more about the conversion. Okay. And this is a composable now because this uses template ref. This takes refs as well. This has a computed, which will always recalculate based on the changes here. So that's great. And then the logic from there will just go ahead and flow. Okay, useSvgConverter can be closed. Last but not least, useFileUploader. I would probably move that also into named function. Just it feels a bit nicer. Where is this used? Oh, down here, of course. So we can also move that lower because it is not as important. You can read it from top level to bottom level, a bit like newspaper style. So like, okay, we have a SvgConverter, we have plausible. I'll probably put that almost to the end because tracking is not that interesting. So we have a file uploader, we have a scale, we have plausible, we have the SvgConverter. Let's check out the file uploader. Also here, useState. I'll just go in here and change everything to ref. And here we'll say image data equals exactly that. We have the event we had before. We talked about that. Have to cast that as HTML input. It is an input element. Yeah, it's correct. And then we have a big if file. I would also revert it here or like turn it around. and then we have SvgContent.value equals content, and image metadata.value equals width, height, and so on and so on. This is in a way also interesting because I probably would write that a little different. Let's see how in a second. Because here, this is accessing SVG content, which is defined. Okay, it's defined over here. No, never mind. Then this is good. Because if it's accessing something outside of it, I'll definitely pass it in. So this is really a self-containing thing. Because it encapsulates one certain concern. And also, that's very important. If you have a composable like these, don't extract them straight away. Leave them in a component unless you know you have to reuse them like we did with plausible. I also made a video about that, link in the description, about organizing code with the composition API. Back to the code. So we have the file, we go through that. Just have to check if there is anything where we use SVG content, for example, where it's not .value. Like here, for example, there is no set. So we just write .value equals empty string. Same here, image metadata. .value equals null. Cancel is there. Cancel is fine. There's still one issue. Oops, there's still one problem with the types, apparently. Let's see. Oh, two even. Where are they? Also open the problems tab, but let's check here. Image metadata is possibly null. Yeah, that's true. This could be. This was not called in the original implementation. That's interesting. So we'll just say if it shouldn't be, we can just say it exists. But let's just gracefully fail here with a 0 or like, I don't know, 1 even. So like, okay, whatsoever. But yeah, that should be there. Because yeah, it's true. It could be null. Interesting. Nevertheless, what's the last red dot over here? When we save, then also here the name might not exist. That's true. It could also here be null. So also there, it was, interestingly, maybe the TypeScript settings were not that strict. It was not set like that. Okay. And then here, SVG content, scale, image metadata. This has to go further down because these information come from the other composable, right? This comes from here. Also, you have to check why this doesn't work out. But before the scale, you can define it on top. So now the only thing is the types seem not to match. So why? Null is not assignable. Interesting. Because the SvgConverter here, null is not an option. Let's add that option though, because it can be that it's null originally, right? If it's not uploaded, it will be null. So we have that option. Okay. A lot of code. Let's see how that works in the application. Okay, the SVG to PNG generator. Let's upload one. Let me pick something familiar. All right. Oh, we broke the scale button. What happens? Can't assign to property value, not an object. Oh, yeah. Let's quickly go to the code. That's a rookie mistake. My bad. So in template, I accidentally set scale value equals value. It's a typical problem, but this is not correct. Mainly because in the template, all the refs are automatically unwrapped. So the .value is not only not necessary, it's wrong. That's why you write scale equals value. And if you now go back to the application, then things work again. Nice. If we save that, it's saved here. The object is interesting. So that's also something in the name we should quickly have a look at in the file name, because apparently x.png, we forgot here, we have props.scale. And we need props.scale value to actually set it nicely. Let's try the same again and see if the name is better now. Maybe this time with a different SVG, something like that maybe. Save that. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, so almost done, huh? We moved the features over. We have the fonts, we have tracking, we have actual functionality. Now the last thing we need is OG images. Let's get started. Okay, to be fair, before we start, we do a little bit of cleanup, remove that SvgTool part. And that's more or less the cleanup. So once again, we need our console. we need to add pnpm nuxt module. And we don't add script, we add OG image. And this is the Nuxt OG image module, which is more or less doing things very similar to Next.OG from the functionality. So the idea is we define, instead of JSX, our own component. And we can say this component here goes into OG image, and let's say general.vue. Because if we have a look in these open graph image things, we see they always use all the same thing, the OG generator with some different text, with some different description. So it's always the same open graph thingy here, there, there, there. So no worries, we can set it up pretty easily. How do we do that? We have the OG image general component. You create a Vue component out of it because everything is just a Vue component. And now we define our props. Let's quickly check what was necessary there in here. And it was title. Do we have also a description or something? Oh yeah, okay, title description. So that's pretty easy, right? Title, mandatory, description, optionally. And interestingly, now we can just take whatever is in the generate image function. If it's just a good old utils OG generator, JSX, and I think it is, yes, and take that over. The best part is, first, we don't need to bother with fonts because we can set up fonts. Inter is the default, so we're good to go. Here are also the props once again, so that's great. The size is 1200 by 600 by default. You can also change that. I won't bother with the 30 pixel, so we're fine. And now we just insert it here. Of course, yes, now we have to go through that. Style, all the styles, colon in front. And we remove one of the brackets, then we put in another one. Actually, if we are clever and replace that, then probably I just say all the quotes are single quotes. Except this one here, that might be a double quote. That looks better. Now, if we have this, we put the double quote beforehand. If you have doubles, remove one, put double quote in front there, because Vue is also supporting all these style declarations, right? To bind that this way. This is not a problem. And last but not least, we want to render description. And we want to render title. Not with params though. Format it. And we're good. And now you might wonder, wait, is this everything we need to do? Well, almost. Now, what we should do, let's try it, for example, with the index.vue page. So pages, index.vue, here. There was this open graph file, I think, here. And it says this. So let's take that, go into our index.vue again. And now we need a script part. So script setup. And in here we say define OG image component. We say, yeah, we want to use general. And we want to use the title QuickPic Nuxt. QuickPic, but with Nuxt. Nothing but better, it's not true. The logic we didn't change much. So now we have that here. And we can now verify if that is already enough to make it work. But how do we do that? Well, the answer is we do that with the Nuxt DevTools. To use the Nuxt DevTools, we have this wonderful little button, or we push Alt, Shift, and D, and then the Nuxt DevTools open. And if you install the OG image module, there is an OG image tab here. An open graph tab is in general always there, but there is another OG image tab here where you can see, oh, there it is. There is our preview. So this is the image that will be generated. That's the best part. You can click on it and you can see it. And if we compare that to the original QuickPic image by just quickly going in here in the debugger source, or like, inspector, OG image, and take that out, then we see that's pretty decent. Almost the right format. As I said, we can change that and we're good. So this works already. It's fine. And without changing much, it's also inter, as said before, so same font, don't have to load anything. Pretty smooth. Now let's add that to the other applications, and then we can make it even a bit easier, and then we can wrap up. So the other pages, first, let's form it. And then we do it with the other pages as well. So in tools here, let's do square image, index, put it up here, and just take whatever was there, put it in here. We define that. And the best part is we can then remove these files. Same for utils as well. This here can all go. And lastly, for SVG to PNG, you can also do that, define that here, take whatever is in there, and put it in here, and get rid of that. So also, once again, just to double check, we can easily have a look by navigating in our browser. So if we go to the browser, now I have this SVG to PNG, or if we say we go back, it's rendering all the things as a preview. You can also, if we really want to, like either move this around, pop it up, whatsoever, that's up on us. You can also say like, yeah, here, move this wherever we want, but it's fine like that. And we get exactly what we want, all the generation here. Great. And there's one more thing we can do, because now we have just a simple index.vue file here. So we can put that out and just name it square image.vue, because we don't need nesting or anything. Same with here, we just name it SVG to PNG.vue and put it out here. So it's even more lean, because then we have a pretty flat page structure. We don't even need a route group, but also in the future, I think route groups will become more useful. So it's good to showcase that. And that's our application. That's actually all we need to do. We should have less files, definitely less effort. And that's that. So the only thing left is pushing and deploying. You'll find a link to the running application as usual in the comments below. Let me know if that helped. Let me know if that makes sense. If you have any questions left, if there's anything else like, hey, how does that work? Let's have a look. And yeah, I hope everything went smooth for your migration. Definitely check out all the other Nuxt videos here. Documentation is also really good. All the modules, lovely. Check out Vue if you're into Vue.js, or if you want to be, because it's a lovely podcast around that. Every week, one episode, same here, every week, one video. And thanks for joining. Have a lovely day whenever you watch that, and happy hacking.